Distinguished listeners, there are secrets that even the most gilded mirrors dare not reflect. Tonight, beneath the crystal chandeliers of Ashworth Manor, a truth so scandalous lurks that it could topple the very foundations of England's most revered bloodline. I am Lady Eveline Winston, and from the shadows of Mayfair's most guarded drawing rooms, I bring you a tale where the lowest servant holds the highest power. Picture, if you will, the grandest estate in all of Yorkshire, Ashworth Manor, where every marble column whispers of centuries past, where Persian rugs worth more than entire villages cushion the steps of those who believe themselves untouchable. The morning mist clings to the vast gardens like secrets to a guilty conscience, and within these hallowed halls, a drama unfolds that would make even the most seasoned courtiers gasp. The manor itself is a testament to the power of accumulated wealth and carefully maintained influence. Its limestone facade stretches across perfectly manicured grounds, with windows that gleam like watchful eyes in the morning light. The circular drive, lined with ancient oaks whose branches form a natural cathedral, leads to doors that have welcomed prime ministers and princes. Yet today they guard secrets that could topple governments. Inside, the atmosphere is thick with the scent of beeswax and lavender, the perfume of privilege maintained through generations of careful attention. The mahogany paneling reflects the soft glow of gas lamps, while portraits of long-dead Ashworth ancestors observe the living with eyes that seem to judge the present against the standards of the past. Each room tells a story of power exercised with velvet gloves over iron fists, of decisions made in drawing rooms that shaped the destiny of nations. Lady Margaret Ashworth, the Dowager Countess, sits rigid in her morning chair, her silver hair arranged in perfect ringlets that frame a face carved from years of maintaining impeccable composure. Her fingers, adorned with emeralds that once graced the neck of a French queen, drum impatiently against the mahogany armrest. The morning light filters through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows that seem to dance with the weight of unspoken truths. "Where is that wretched girl?" she mutters, her voice carrying the authority of someone who has never been denied anything in her 73 years of existence. The Dowager Countess speaks of Clara Whitmore, a servant girl whose very existence has become both a blessing and a curse to the Ashworth lineage. Clara moves through the servants' quarters with the grace of someone who has learned to become invisible. Her chestnut hair is pinned beneath a starched white cap, and her simple gray dress marks her station as clearly as any scarlet letter. Yet there is something different about Clara, a quiet intelligence that flickers behind her emerald eyes, a way of moving that suggests she sees everything while appearing to notice nothing. The girl carries herself with a dignity that speaks of education beyond her station, though she has learned to hide this accomplishment carefully. In the world below stairs, too much intelligence can be as dangerous as too little discretion. Clara has mastered the art of appearing simple while observing everything, of seeming grateful for her position while quietly cataloging the weaknesses and vanities of those she serves. Her room in the servants' quarters is barely larger than a closet, with a narrow bed, a small chest for her few belongings, and a window that looks out onto the kitchen gardens. It is here that she has hidden the journal that now threatens to destroy everything she has known. The leather-bound book rests beneath a loose floorboard, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from the dampness that seeps through the old stone walls. Clara's hands bear the calluses of honest labor scrubbing floors, polishing silver, tending fires that warm rooms she will never own. Yet her fingers are also stained with ink, evidence of her secret skill with letters and numbers. She has taught herself to read and write with a proficiency that would surprise her employers, using discarded newspapers and forgotten books to educate herself in the quiet hours before dawn. The great house awakens with its usual symphony of preparation. Silver is polished to mirror brightness, floors are swept until they gleam like glass, and fires are lit in marble hearths that could warm entire cottages. The servants move with practiced efficiency, each knowing their place in the intricate hierarchy that governs life below stairs. The servants' hall bustles with quiet activity as the day begins. Cook, a formidable woman whose authority in the kitchen rivals that of any general, directs the preparation of breakfast with military precision. Her assistants move like dancers in a carefully choreographed performance, their movements economical and purposeful. The scullery maids scrub pots with vigor born of necessity, knowing that any imperfection will result in sharp words and reduced wages. Above stairs, the house presents a different face entirely. Here every surface gleams with the patina of wealth well maintained. The drawing room, with its silk wallpaper and carefully arranged furniture, speaks of taste refined over generations. Fresh flowers from the manor's extensive gardens perfume the air, while crystal decanters catch the morning light like captured rainbows. The library, where Clara's fateful discovery was made, stands as a monument to the accumulated knowledge of the Ashworth family. Floor-to-ceiling shelves hold volumes that span centuries, their leather bindings worn smooth by the hands of countless readers. It is here that the family's most precious secrets have been hidden, tucked away behind false panels and forgotten compartments like guilty consciences made tangible. But Clara carries a burden that no amount of training could have prepared her for. 3 nights ago, while cleaning the library after the family's retirement, she discovered a leather-bound journal hidden behind a false panel in the mahogany desk. The journal, written in the late Earl's own hand, contained revelations that could destroy not just reputations, but the very legitimacy of the Ashworth succession. The current Earl, Lord Jonathan Ashworth, is a man of 32 years who carries himself with the confidence of inherited nobility. His dark hair is styled in the fashion of London's most distinguished gentlemen, and his blue eyes hold the kind of intensity that comes from never having been truly challenged. This morning, he paces the length of his study, unaware that his every secret has been laid bare to the one person he would never suspect. The study itself reflects the man who occupies it, elegant, imposing, yet somehow lacking in warmth. The mahogany desk, a masterpiece of craftsmanship that has served 3 generations of Ashworth men, dominates the room. Its surface is arranged with the precision of a military operation. Correspondence neatly stacked, an inkwell of sterling silver, and a leather-bound appointment book that chronicles the social obligations of the aristocracy. Behind the desk, tall windows overlook the estate's vast parkland, where deer graze beneath ancient trees that have witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties. The view is designed to remind visitors of the family's power and permanence, yet today it seems to mock Lord Jonathan's anxiety. He has sensed the subtle changes in the household's rhythm, the way conversations stop when he enters a room, the manner in which servants avoid his direct gaze. The walls of the study are lined with portraits of his ancestors, men who built their fortunes through a combination of political acumen, military service, and matrimonial strategy. Each face tells a story of ambition realized and power maintained, yet Lord Jonathan knows that he may be the last to bear the family name with legitimate claim to its honors. As Clara descends the servants' staircase, her heart pounds with each step. The wooden boards creak under her feet, each sound seeming to announce her guilt to the world. She clutches the feather duster tighter, using it as both tool and shield against the weight of what she knows. Mrs. Hartwell, the head housekeeper, intercepts Clara at the bottom of the stairs. Her stern face, weathered by decades of service, shows no softness despite the early hour. "Lady Margaret has been asking for you, girl. Mind yourself, she's in one of her moods this morning." Clara nods, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Mrs. Hartwell. I'll go to her at once." The journey to the morning room feels like a march to the gallows. Clara's mind races with possibilities. Has her late-night discovery been noticed? Does the family suspect that their most guarded secret now rests in the hands of someone they consider beneath their notice? The morning room, with its delicate rose-colored wallpaper and collection of porcelain figurines, seems to mock Clara's anxiety. Lady Margaret sits like a queen upon her throne, her breakfast tray barely touched, her attention focused entirely on the servant girl who has somehow become the most dangerous person in the household. The room itself is a masterpiece of feminine refinement, designed to showcase the Dowager Countess's impeccable taste and cultural sophistication. Watercolor paintings by fashionable artists grace the walls, their pastoral scenes a stark contrast to the tension that fills the air. A pianoforte stands in one corner, its surface decorated with photographs in silver frames, images of family gatherings, royal presentations, and social triumphs that now seem fragile as spun glass. The morning light streams through windows dressed in silk curtains, casting everything in a golden glow that should be peaceful but instead feels ominous. Every object in the room, from the delicate tea service to the arrangement of hothouse flowers, speaks of a world where appearances matter more than truth, where maintaining the facade of respectability is worth any price. Lady Margaret's china cup sits forgotten on its saucer, the Earl Grey growing cold as she studies Clara with the intensity of a naturalist examining a newly discovered species. The silence stretches between them like a taut wire, ready to snap at the slightest provocation. In this moment, the invisible gulf between aristocrat and servant has become a chasm that threatens to swallow them both. "You were in the library quite late last evening," Lady Margaret states, her voice carrying the weight of accusation disguised as observation. "Mrs. Hartwell mentioned you were still working when she made her final rounds." Clara's breath catches, but she maintains her composure. "Yes, my lady. The silver needed additional polishing, and I wanted to ensure everything was perfect for your morning tea." The Dowager Countess studies Clara with eyes that have witnessed the rise and fall of empires. There is something in the girl's manner that troubles her, a tension that speaks of knowledge that should not exist in one so low-born. "Tell me, Clara," Lady Margaret continues, her voice soft but dangerous, "in all your cleaning, have you ever come across anything that might be considered unusual?" The question hangs in the air like incense, heavy with implication. Clara feels the weight of the hidden journal as if it were burning against her skin, though it remains safely concealed in her quarters. "No, my lady. Nothing unusual at all." But as Clara speaks these words, she fails to notice the shadow that passes by the morning room window, a figure that has been watching, waiting, and calculating. Someone else knows about the journal, someone who has been tracking Clara's every movement since that fateful night in the library. The real question is not whether Clara can keep the secret, but whether she can survive long enough to decide what to do with it. The afternoon sun slants through the great windows of Ashworth Manor, creating a chessboard of light and shadow across the Persian carpets. In the servants' hall, the usual chatter has given way to whispered conversations and furtive glances. Something has shifted in the delicate balance of the household, and every servant feels it like a change in the weather. Clara sits at the long oak table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that has long since grown cold. The other servants avoid her gaze, sensing the invisible burden she carries. Even Thomas, the young footman who has shown interest in her for months, keeps his distance, as if proximity to her might somehow implicate him in whatever storm is brewing. Mrs. Hartwell enters the hall with her characteristic brisk efficiency, her keys jingling like warning bells against her dark dress. Her sharp eyes scan the assembled servants, but they linger longest on Clara. There is something calculating in her gaze, as if she is solving a puzzle that only she can see. "The family will be receiving guests this evening," Mrs. Hartwell announces, her voice carrying the authority of someone who has managed households for 3 decades. "Lady Pemberton and her daughter will be staying for the weekend. I expect perfection from all of you." The mention of Lady Pemberton sends a ripple of interest through the servants. She is known throughout the county as a woman whose tongue is sharper than any blade, whose presence at social gatherings can either elevate or destroy reputations with a single well-placed comment. Clara's heart sinks. More guests mean more eyes, more opportunities for discovery, more chances for her secret to be revealed. She rises from the table, intending to begin her preparations, but Mrs. Hartwell's voice stops her. "Clara, you'll be assigned to Lady Pemberton's daughter. See that she wants for nothing." The assignment feels like both protection and punishment. Serving the guest daughter will keep Clara away from the family's private spaces, but it also places her under the scrutiny of outsiders who might notice what the household has become blind to. As Clara makes her way through the maze of corridors that connect the servants' quarters to the main house, she passes through a section of the mansion that few are privileged to see. The walls here are lined with portraits of Ashworth ancestors, their painted eyes seeming to follow her movement. Each face tells a story of power, privilege, and the terrible weight of maintaining both. But it is the portrait at the end of the corridor that stops Clara in her tracks. The late Earl, Lord Jonathan's father, stares down at her with eyes that hold the same intensity as his son's. In the painted face, Clara sees the man who wrote the journal that now burns like a coal in her possession. The man who documented his greatest shame with meticulous care, as if confessing to an empty room might somehow absolve him of his sins. Magnificent, isn't it? A voice says behind her, causing Clara to spin around with a startled gasp. Lord Jonathan himself stands in the corridor, his tall frame silhouetted against the afternoon light. His presence here in the servants' passage is so unexpected that Clara cannot find her voice to respond. "My father," he continues, approaching the portrait with casual confidence. He was a complex man, brilliant, respected, but... He pauses, his eyes meeting Clara's with an intensity that makes her feel exposed. There were things about him that even I didn't know until after his death. Clara's hands tremble as she clutches her cleaning supplies. Does he know? Has he discovered the journal's absence? The question burns in her throat, but she dare not ask it. "You knew him, didn't you?" Lord Jonathan asks, his voice gentle but probing. "You've been with us for 3 years now." He often spoke fondly of the servants who showed dedication to their duties. "He was a kind master, my lord," Clara manages, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, he was." Lord Jonathan's gaze returns to the portrait. But kindness can sometimes lead to complications. Decisions that seem right in the moment but prove problematic later. The words hang between them like a confession. And Clara realizes with growing horror that this conversation is no accident. Lord Jonathan knows something, perhaps not everything, but enough to be dangerous. "Tell me, Clara," he continues, using her name with a familiarity that sends chills down her spine. "What do you think makes a person worthy of trust?" The question is a trap, beautifully constructed and impossible to escape. Clara's mind races, searching for an answer that will neither reveal too much nor seem evasive. "Loyalty, my lord, and the wisdom to know when silence serves a greater good." Lord Jonathan smiles, but there is no warmth in it. "Precisely. The wisdom to know when silence serves a greater good." He steps closer, close enough that Clara can smell the sandalwood cologne he wears, close enough that she can see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. "I trust you understand the importance of such wisdom, Clara." It is not a question but a warning, delivered with the kind of aristocratic politeness that makes threats all the more terrifying. Clara nods, not trusting her voice to remain steady. "Excellent. Now, I believe you have preparations to make for our guests." As Lord Jonathan walks away, his footsteps echoing in the corridor, Clara remains frozen before the portrait. The painted eyes of the late Earl seem to bore into her soul, and she wonders if the dead can judge the living for the secrets they keep. But she is not alone in her thoughts. From the shadows of an adjacent corridor, another figure watches her reaction, cataloging every expression, every gesture. Someone who has been following this deadly game from the beginning, someone who knows that the journal Clara discovered is only the beginning of a much larger conspiracy. The guests will arrive within hours, and with them, the stakes will rise exponentially. Because Lady Pemberton's daughter carries secrets of her own. Secrets that will transform this delicate dance of knowledge and power into something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The evening light bathes Ashworth Manor in golden hues as the Pemberton carriage rolls up the circular drive, its wheels crunching on perfectly manicured gravel. The arrival of guests always transforms the household into a symphony of orchestrated chaos, with every servant playing their part in the grand performance of aristocratic hospitality. Clara watches from an upstairs window as Lady Pemberton emerges from the carriage, her imposing figure draped in midnight blue silk that catches the last rays of sunlight. But it is her daughter who captures Clara's attention, Miss Sophia Pemberton, a young woman of perhaps 25, whose beauty is matched only by the calculating intelligence that flickers behind her dark eyes. The great hall fills with the rustle of silk and the murmur of polite conversation as the Ashworth family welcomes their guests. Lord Jonathan, resplendent in his evening attire, bows over Lady Pemberton's gloved hand with practiced charm. The Dowager Countess, adorned in pearls that once belonged to a Russian princess, commands the room with her presence. But Clara sees what the others miss: the subtle tension in Lord Jonathan's shoulders, the way his smile never quite reaches his eyes, the quick glance he exchanges with his mother that speaks of shared anxiety. They are a family under siege, though their enemies remain invisible to all but the most observant. Miss Pemberton requires assistance with her evening ensemble, Mrs. Hartwell informs Clara, her voice carrying the weight of unspoken expectations. See that she is made comfortable. And Clara. The housekeeper's voice drops to a whisper. Mind yourself around that one. She has eyes like a hawk and a memory like a steel trap. Clara's assignment leads her through the guest wing, past rooms that smell of lavender and beeswax, where fires crackle in marble hearths and fresh flowers bloom in crystal vases. The luxury is breathtaking, but Clara has learned to see beyond the surface beauty to the careful calculations that maintain such perfection. Miss Pemberton's suite is a masterpiece of feminine refinement, with rose-colored wallpaper and furniture that speaks of French craftsmanship. The young woman herself sits at the dressing table, her reflection multiplied in the three-panel mirror, creating the illusion of an endless row of calculating faces. "You must be Clara," Sophia says without turning around, her voice cultured and precise. "I've heard such interesting things about you." The comment stops Clara cold. How could a guest from another county know anything about a servant girl? The question must show on her face because Sophia laughs, a sound like silver bells that somehow manages to be both beautiful and threatening. "Oh, don't look so surprised. The servants' network spans all of England, my dear. We know everything about everyone, don't we?" Sophia finally turns, her dark eyes meeting Clara's in the mirror. The question is what we choose to do with that knowledge. Clara begins the delicate process of preparing Sophia's evening gown, her hands moving with automatic precision while her mind races. This is no ordinary guest. There is something deliberate about her presence here, something that speaks of careful planning rather than social courtesy. "Tell me about the family," Sophia continues, her voice conversational but sharp with interest. "They seem tense this evening, as if they're expecting something unpleasant." The observation is too accurate to be casual. Clara's hands still for a moment before resuming their work. "I wouldn't know, miss. I only know my duties." "Of course you do." Sophia's smile is knowing. "But sometimes our duties require us to notice things, don't they? To see patterns that others miss." The silk gown slides over Sophia's head like liquid moonlight, transforming her into a vision of aristocratic elegance. But Clara notices other details: the way Sophia's fingers tap against the dressing table in a nervous rhythm, the quick glances she steals toward the door as if expecting interruption. "There's something I need you to understand, Clara," Sophia says, her voice dropping to a whisper. "My presence here tonight is not entirely social. There are questions that need answering. Questions about the legitimacy of certain claims." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. Legitimacy. Claims. The very topics that dominate the hidden journal she discovered. This is no coincidence. Sophia Pemberton is here for a reason, and that reason is connected to the secret that Clara has been guarding with her life. "I don't understand, miss," Clara manages, though her voice betrays her rising panic. "Don't you?" Sophia rises from the dressing table, her gown rustling like autumn leaves. "Let me be more direct. There are those who believe that the current Earl's claim to the title is questionable. That perhaps the late Earl made decisions that complicate the succession." Clara's blood turns to ice. The journal she discovered contained exactly such revelations: documentation of the late Earl's relationship with a woman who was not his wife, evidence of a son born in secret, proof that the current line of succession might not be as legitimate as it appears. Someone has been asking questions, Sophia continues, circling Clara like a predator. Someone with access to private documents, someone who has been in the library late at night, someone who knows more than they should. The trap is closing, and Clara realizes with growing horror that she has been manipulated from the beginning. Her discovery of the journal was no accident. It was orchestrated by someone who needed a scapegoat, someone who could be blamed if the secret ever came to light. "What do you want from me?" Clara whispers, abandoning all pretense of innocence. "I want the truth," Sophia replies, her voice hard as diamond. "And I want it tonight. Because if you don't cooperate, if you don't give me what I need, then I'm afraid your secret will become everyone's secret. And we both know what happens to servants who forget their place." The threat hangs in the air like poison, and Clara realizes that she has become a pawn in a game she never knew she was playing. The journal that she thought was her secret weapon has become the instrument of her destruction. But as Sophia speaks, Clara notices something else, a shadow that passes by the window, a figure that lingers just long enough to suggest that this conversation is not as private as it seems. Someone else is watching, someone else is listening, and Clara begins to suspect that the web of lies surrounding the Ashworth family is far more complex than she ever imagined. The evening has barely begun, and already the foundations of everything Clara thought she knew are crumbling beneath her feet. But the real revelation, the truth that will shatter not just her world but the entire structure of aristocratic society, is still to come. The dinner gong resonates through Ashworth Manor like the tolling of a death bell, summoning all players to the stage where the final act of deception will unfold. Clara's hands shake as she makes final adjustments to Sophia's gown, each touch of silk feeling like a betrayal of the family she has served faithfully for 3 years. The dining room is a masterpiece of aristocratic grandeur, with its mahogany table that could seat 20, crystal chandeliers that cast dancing shadows on silk-covered walls, and portraits of Ashworth ancestors watching over the proceedings like silent judges. Tonight, however, the usual warmth of familial dining has been replaced by an atmosphere thick with unspoken tension. Lord Jonathan sits at the head of the table, his posture rigid with the weight of maintaining appearances. The Dowager Countess, resplendent in emerald silk that matches her jewels, commands her end of the table with imperial grace. Lady Pemberton, a woman whose reputation for social destruction precedes her like a dark cloud, observes everything with the calculating eyes of a predator. But it is Sophia who transforms the evening into something dangerous. She glides into the room like a dark angel, her beauty masking the deadly intelligence that Clara now knows lurks beneath the surface. The young woman takes her assigned seat with practiced grace, but Clara notices the way her eyes catalog every detail, every gesture, every nuance of the family's behavior. "Lord Jonathan," Lady Pemberton begins, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard, "I trust you've been managing the estate well since your father's passing. Such a tragedy, his sudden death. Though I suppose in some ways it simplified certain complications." The comment lands like a stone thrown into still water, creating ripples of discomfort that spread across the table. Lord Jonathan's grip tightens on his wine glass, and Clara, serving the second course, notices the way his knuckles whiten with the strain. "My father was a dedicated steward of the Ashworth legacy," he replies, his voice carefully controlled. "Whatever complications you might be referring to, I assure you they were handled with the utmost discretion." Sophia's laugh is like the tinkling of broken glass. Discretion is such a valuable commodity, isn't it? Though I've always wondered whether secrets, once buried, ever truly stay that way. The servants move through the room like ghosts, Clara among them, but she feels the weight of every word as if it were directed at her specifically. The conversation continues with the polite veneer of social discourse, but underneath runs a current of threat that makes the very air seem charged with danger. "There was a time," Lady Pemberton continues, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin, "when questions were raised about certain irregularities in the family records. Birth certificates that seemed to appear rather suddenly, documentation that some might consider convenient. The Dowager Countess's composure cracks for just a moment, a flicker of fear crossing her patrician features before she regains control. I'm sure I don't know what you're referring to, Lady Pemberton. The Ashworth records are beyond reproach. Of course they are, Sophia interjects, her voice honey-sweet but deadly. Though I've been told that sometimes the most interesting records are those that aren't kept in the official archives. Personal journals, private correspondence, documents that might reveal the true nature of certain relationships. Clara nearly drops the serving dish she's carrying. The reference to personal journals cannot be coincidental. Somehow, Sophia knows about the leather-bound book that Clara discovered in the library's secret compartment. The question is how much she knows and, more importantly, what she intends to do with that knowledge. Miss Pemberton, Lord Jonathan says, his voice carrying a warning that would intimidate anyone with sense. I hope you're not suggesting that my family has anything to hide. Oh, Lord Jonathan, Sophia replies with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. Every family has something to hide. The question is whether those secrets are worth protecting at any cost. The tension in the room has become palpable, and Clara realizes that she is witnessing the opening moves of a battle that will determine not just the fate of the Ashworth family, but her own survival. The journal she discovered was never meant to remain hidden. It was bait in a trap that has been years in the making. As the evening progresses, the conversation grows more pointed, more dangerous. Clara learns through carefully orchestrated revelations that the late Earl's relationship with a woman named Elizabeth Hartwell, the housekeeper's sister, had produced a son who would have a stronger claim to the title than the current Earl, if his legitimacy could be proven. The realization hits Clara like a physical blow. Mrs. Hartwell's increasing attention to her movements, her seemingly protective guidance, her knowledge of the family's secrets, it all makes sense now. The housekeeper has been using Clara as an unwitting agent in a plan to expose the truth about the succession. But as the pieces of the puzzle fall into place, Clara also realizes that she has become expendable. Once the secret is revealed, once the legitimacy of Lord Jonathan's claim is questioned, the servant who discovered the evidence will become a liability that cannot be allowed to survive. The dinner reaches its climax when Sophia, with theatrical precision, produces a letter from her reticule. The paper is yellowed with age, and Clara recognizes the handwriting immediately. It matches the journal she discovered, the same elegant script that documented the late Earl's most guarded secrets. This letter, Sophia announces, her voice carrying to every corner of the room, was written by the late Earl to Elizabeth Hartwell. In it, he acknowledges the birth of their son, and expresses his intention to provide for the child's future, a future that would include, under certain circumstances, recognition of his legitimate claim to the Ashworth title. The silence that follows is deafening. Lord Jonathan's face has gone pale, and the Dowager Countess grips her napkin as if it were a lifeline. The servants, Clara among them, stand frozen like statues, witnesses to the destruction of a dynasty. But it is Mrs. Hartwell who breaks the silence, stepping forward from her position near the sideboard with a composure that speaks of years of preparation for this moment. My lords and ladies, she says, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she's revealing. I believe it's time for the truth to be told. The child spoken of in that letter, he lives. He has been raised in secret, educated and prepared for the day when justice would finally be served. The words hang in the air like a death sentence, and Clara realizes that she has been present at the moment when the natural order of the world shifted forever. But even as she processes the revelation, she becomes aware of a new danger. Someone else in the room has been preparing for this moment, someone who will not allow the truth to destroy everything they have worked to protect. The real question is not whether the secret can be contained, but whether anyone in the room will survive to see the dawn. The revelation hangs over the dining room like a poisonous cloud, transforming the elegant space into something that feels more like a courtroom than a place of refined entertainment. The crystal glasses catch the candlelight, but instead of creating beauty, they seem to fragment the light into sharp, dangerous pieces that reflect the shattered illusions of aristocratic respectability. Lord Jonathan rises from his chair with the careful precision of a man who knows that every movement is being watched, every gesture analyzed for signs of weakness. His face has regained its color, but Clara notices the way his hands tremble slightly as he places his napkin on the table. "This is quite an elaborate charade," he says, his voice carrying the authority of inherited privilege but lacking its usual confidence. "Are we to believe that my father, a man of impeccable character and devoted marriage, would have engaged in such impropriety?" Mrs. Hartwell steps forward, her decades of service giving her a dignity that rivals that of the nobility she has served. "Your father was a good man, Lord Jonathan, but he was human. He fell in love with my sister Elizabeth when they were both young, before his marriage was arranged. Their love was genuine, and when she bore his child, he did not abandon them." The Dowager Countess's composure finally cracks completely. "This is impossible. I would have known. I was his wife for 40 years. "You knew what you chose to know," Mrs. Hartwell replies, her voice gentle but implacable. "Elizabeth was sent away when her condition became apparent. She was told it was for her own protection, and in many ways it was. But she was also provided for generously until her death 5 years ago." Clara feels the weight of history pressing down on her, as she realizes that she has been manipulated by everyone. The journal she discovered was not hidden to keep a secret. It was placed where she would find it, used as evidence in a plan that has been decades in the making. "And where," Lady Pemberton asks, her voice sharp with interest, "is this alleged son now?" The question creates a moment of absolute silence, and Clara realizes that the answer will determine not just the fate of the Ashworth title, but the survival of everyone in the room. The natural order of aristocratic society cannot tolerate such upheaval. Too much depends on the unquestioned legitimacy of bloodlines. "He has been educated as a gentleman," Mrs. Hartwell continues, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she's revealing. "He knows nothing of his true parentage, believes himself to be the son of a successful merchant, but he carries his father's features, his intelligence, his natural nobility of spirit." Sophia leans forward, her dark eyes glittering with satisfaction. "And he has a name, doesn't he? A name that would shock even this distinguished company." The revelation that Clara has been dreading finally comes to pass. Mrs. Hartwell's voice breaks slightly as she speaks the words that will change everything. "Thomas Hartwell, the footman who has served this household faithfully for 2 years. The young man who has shown such dedication to his duties, such natural grace in his service. He is the late Earl's son, and by rights, he should inherit the title." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Clara's legs nearly give out as she realizes that the young man who has been kind to her, who has shown romantic interest in her simple existence, is actually the rightful heir to one of England's greatest estates. Thomas himself appears in the doorway as if summoned by the mention of his name, his face pale with confusion and growing horror as he realizes that his entire world has just been turned upside down. "I don't understand," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Hartwell, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that you are not who you think you are, my dear boy," she replies, tears streaming down her face. "You are the son of the late Earl of Ashworth, and you have been denied your birthright for 26 years. The young man staggers as if struck, his hand reaching for the doorframe for support. Clara sees in his face the same shock and disbelief that she feels, the same sense of being caught in a web of lies that spans generations. But Lord Jonathan is not finished fighting. "This is preposterous. You cannot simply declare a servant to be nobility. Where is the proof? Where is the documentation that would support such an outrageous claim?" Sophia's smile is triumphant as she produces another document from her reticule. "Here," she says, unfolding a certificate with the care of someone handling explosives. Thomas's birth certificate, registered in the parish of St. Mary's, listing the Earl as his father. Witnessed by the vicar and the local magistrate. The document passes from hand to hand, each person examining it with the desperate hope that it might be forged, false, anything but the truth it represents. But the paper is genuine, the seal's authentic, the signatures verified. This changes nothing, the Dowager Countess declares, her voice rising with desperation. The law recognizes legitimate heirs, not bastards born of adultery. Actually, Lady Pemberton interjects, her voice carrying the authority of someone who has researched the law thoroughly. The law recognizes children acknowledged by their fathers, especially when there is documentation of such acknowledgement. The journal that was discovered, and I believe we all know which journal I'm referring to, contains explicit recognition of Thomas as the Earl's son. Clara realizes that she has been used as a pawn in a game that began long before she was born, a game that has reached its conclusion tonight. The journal she discovered was meant to be found, meant to provide the evidence that would support Thomas's claim to the title. But as the truth settles over the room like a shroud, Clara also realizes that the danger is far from over. The current Earl and his mother have too much to lose, and desperate people in positions of power are capable of desperate acts. Lord Jonathan's eyes meet Clara's across the room, and she sees in them a calculation that chills her to the bone. She knows too much, has been too close to the truth, has become a witness who might not be allowed to survive. The evening has revealed the truth, but the price of that truth is yet to be paid. And Clara suspects that the cost will be measured not just in titles and estates, but in blood. The grandfather clock in the great hall chimes midnight, its deep tones marking not just the end of a day, but the end of an era. The revelation has settled over Ashworth Manor like a dark blanket, transforming the grand estate into something that feels more like a battlefield than a home. Clara stands in the shadows of the dining room, watching as the most powerful family in Yorkshire grapples with the destruction of everything they have built their lives upon. The servants have been dismissed, but she remains, invisible as always, yet more dangerous than any of them realize. Thomas sits in a chair by the window, his face pale with shock as he struggles to process the truth about his parentage. The young man who woke this morning as a footman will sleep tonight as the rightful Earl of Ashworth, assuming he lives to see another dawn. The law may be on your side, Lord Jonathan says, his voice carrying the cold precision of a man who has accepted defeat but not surrender. But the law is not the only power in England. There are ways to ensure that inconvenient truths remain buried. The threat is barely veiled, and Clara feels the temperature in the room drop by several degrees. This is no longer about inheritance or legitimacy. It has become a matter of survival for everyone involved. Mrs. Hartwell moves to stand beside Thomas, her protective instincts overriding decades of deference to the family she has served. You cannot simply murder your way out of this, Lord Jonathan. Too many people know the truth now. Do they? Lord Jonathan's smile is cold as winter morning. A servant girl who discovered a journal that could easily be dismissed as a fabrication. A housekeeper whose testimony would be discredited by her obvious bias. A guest whose motives are questionable at best. Sophia laughs, but there is no humor in the sound. You underestimate the reach of certain networks, my lord. This information has already been documented, copied, and distributed to parties who would find it most interesting. Your threats are meaningless. The Dowager Countess rises from her chair with the dignity of a queen facing the scaffold. What do you want from us? What will it take to resolve this matter quietly? Recognition, Mrs. Hartwell replies without hesitation. Thomas must be acknowledged as the rightful heir. The title, the estates, the responsibilities, all of it must pass to him as his father intended. And in return? Lord Jonathan asks, though his tone suggests he already knows the answer will be unacceptable. In return, Sophia continues, you will receive a generous allowance and the right to remain in one of the smaller properties. You will live comfortably, but you will never again claim a title that was never rightfully yours. The terms are more generous than Clara expected, but she can see in Lord Jonathan's face that he will never accept them. Men who have lived their entire lives as gods among mortals do not easily accept relegation to mere humanity. There is another option, the Dowager Countess says, her voice carrying the weight of desperate calculation. An accident, perhaps. A fire in the servants' quarters that claims the lives of those who know too much. Such things happen in old houses. The casual discussion of murder sends ice through Clara's veins. She realizes that her position as a witness makes her as much a target as Thomas or Mrs. Hartwell. The family she has served faithfully for 3 years is now planning her death with the same attention they once gave to planning dinner parties. But Clara has learned much during her years of service, and she has not remained idle during the evening's revelations. While the others have been focused on the dramatic confrontation, she has been making preparations of her own. "I'm afraid that would be quite impossible," Clara says, stepping forward from the shadows where she has been waiting. Her voice is steady, but her heart pounds with the courage of desperation. The entire room turns to look at her, and Clara sees surprise, calculation, and growing alarm in their faces. The invisible servant has chosen to become visible at the worst possible moment. "You see," Clara continues, reaching into her apron pocket, "I anticipated that this evening might end with such discussions, so I took the liberty of making some preparations." She produces a small leather journal, not the one she discovered in the library, but a new one written in her own careful handwriting. This contains a complete record of tonight's events, including the threats made against Thomas, Mrs. Hartwell, and myself. It also includes detailed descriptions of the original journal and its contents. Lord Jonathan's face goes white. "You couldn't have written all of that tonight." "No," Clara agrees, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I've been writing it for days, ever since I discovered the truth. And I've left copies in very secure locations, with instructions that they be delivered to the authorities if anything happens to me." The revelation that the servant girl has outmaneuvered them all sends shockwaves through the room. Clara, the invisible observer, has become the most powerful person in the house. "Furthermore," Clara continues, pressing her advantage, "I've sent word to certain interested parties about tonight's gathering. If we all disappear in a convenient fire, it will only confirm what they already suspect." Sophia claps her hands together in delight. "Brilliant! The servant girl has learned to play the game better than her masters." But Clara isn't finished. "There's one more thing you all need to know. The journal I found in the library? I didn't just read it, I memorized it. Every word, every detail, every secret it contained. And some of those secrets go far beyond Thomas's parentage." The threat hangs in the air like a sword, and Clara sees the exact moment when the balance of power shifts permanently. The family who once held life and death power over her now finds themselves at her mercy. "What do you want?" Lord Jonathan asks, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want justice," Clara replies. "I want Thomas to receive what is rightfully his. I want Mrs. Hartwell to be protected for her courage in speaking the truth. And I want to leave here alive, with enough money to start a new life far from this place." The terms are simple, but they represent a complete reversal of the natural order. The servant has become the master, and the masters have become supplicants begging for mercy. As the first light of dawn begins to creep through the windows of Ashworth Manor, Clara realizes that she has survived the most dangerous night of her life. The truth has been revealed, justice will be served, and the secrets that once seemed so powerful have lost their ability to destroy. Thomas will become the earl he was born to be, Mrs. Hartwell will receive the recognition she deserves, and Clara will begin a new life with the knowledge that sometimes, even the most powerless can change the course of history. The game is over, and for once the servants have won. Dear listeners, as dawn breaks over the Yorkshire countryside, we witness the end of an era and the beginning of another. The truth, as I have always maintained, has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep it has been buried. Sometimes it takes a servant girl with nothing to lose to remind us that justice, like the sunrise, is inevitable. The Ashworth dynasty will continue, but under new management. And perhaps in a world where merit matters more than birthright, that is exactly as it should be. Until next time, this is Lady Eveline Winston, reminding you that in the great game of life, the most dangerous player is often the one who appears to have no power at all.